What makes Final Fantasy VII Final Fantasy VII? What has made it stand the test of time and kept players returning to the planet again and again? And why do people still talk about this game almost 20 years after its release? Is it the story? The music? The visuals? Or maybe all of these things coming together beautifully to build what some would call a cohesive masterpiece? But perhaps it's what we don't know that resonates so deeply with us. The things that are left up to interpretation. The things that make everyone's journey that little bit more personal. Some would call these plot holes, but they're really not. Nomura stated with the development of Advent Children, it was made by a Japanese staff. Generally, Hollywood movies demand exact answers. For that, Advent Children might not be kind to people who need it. You can interpret and understand things as you like, so you can enjoy exchanging your opinions with friends. It's a piece of work made so that you want to talk about it with others. He didn't want it to be like Hollywood movies, where every single thing is explained with exposition. He wanted the audience to come up with their own interpretations and explanations. This was how the original game was handled too. There's a term in psychology called cognitive completion theory, or apophenia, where a person tends to try to make sense of patterns, correlations, or shapes where there are pieces missing. This phenomenon can often be seen in optical illusions, as the brain will literally see things that aren't there in order to complete a pattern. When applied to story elements, this can be defined as a need for narrative resolution, for the story to be completed with any loose ends tied up and questions answered. The creators have given us just enough information to get a sense of the narrative, but they've left enough room for us to come up with our own interpretations. These interpretations, the things we've filled the holes with, become what's referred to as headcanons, beliefs which haven't been outright confirmed within the narrative, but seem to make sense to the individual, and as such, are adopted as a sort of personal canon, something the individual believes to be a true, concrete part of the story. Ultimately, this gives the player the role of storyteller or artist, an integral and essential part of the overall plot of the game, without whom the story would be incomplete. Arguably, this is partly true for all games, as the very nature of the medium causes a game to be nothing without the person playing it. We're given tools by the makers and developers of games to express ourselves and write our own narratives with it, rendering all games a collaborative effort between developer and player. However, with Final Fantasy VII, this is far more pronounced due to the developers' reluctance to provide us with exact answers, as Nomura put it. In fact, the team behind Final Fantasy VII were actively seeking to leave the game's storyline open to interpretation, even going as far as to encourage discussion between individual fans about their own personal analysis. Take for example, the Cetra and Genova. The tale of what happened between the Ancients and the Calamity from the Sky is left very vague and patchy. This perhaps is understandable, as of course, these events took place around 2,000 years before the time of the game. But this also leaves the story open to very different readings, as shown in-game by Efalna and Sephiroth, who both tell very different accounts of what happened 2,000 years ago. Efalna describes Genova as the crisis from the sky. She explains how the Cetra were attacked by a virus given to them by Genova, and went mad, transforming into monsters, whereas Sephiroth believes Genova to have been an ancient who was found in the geological stratum of 2,000 years ago. Long ago, disaster struck the planet, Sephiroth says in the game. Clearly his understanding is that an entirely different entity attacked and killed the Cetra, to whom Genova belonged. But which of these accounts is the player to believe? This is all the information we're presented about the creature named Genova and her relationship with the Cetra, and thus are left to come up with our own conclusion about which retelling of the events is the truer of the two. The developers were keen to provide just enough detail to compel the player to delve into the deepest depths to get every last scrap of the story, but inevitably leave them to come up with their own deductions about what just isn't there. The tendency to manipulate the presented material into individual interpretations is present in widely accepted depictions of the characters of Final Fantasy VII as well. Fanart and fanfiction are commonly utilized as methods of sharing personal, headcanon versions of characters and worlds with other people who are invested in these games and fandoms, and starting conversations amongst fans, as Nomura stated he wanted. How often do we see voluptuous Tifa depicted in fanart as a sex object, while Aerith is shown as a pure, virtuous, almost holy woman? This is hardly how the two are portrayed in the game. Tifa is described as bright and optimistic, someone who always cheers up the others when they're down, while still being able to decimate almost any enemy with her fists. And at times she's even shown as shy and unsure of herself. Aerith, on the other hand, is young, beautiful, and somewhat mysterious, a character who can be cheeky, upfront, and even flirty. However, so many people subscribe to the versions of them displayed in fanart and fanfiction that you'd be forgiven for forgetting the personalities the developers originally bestowed on them in the game. That brings us to the love triangle debate, the ever-present, raging argument between fans about which of the two women Cloud loves. If we're completely honest with ourselves, if we hadn't been given the freedom to create our own versions of the events to fill in everything that's left unanswered, would there even be a debate? Is being given the option to essentially pick the character you personally prefer within the implied love triangle left without clear resolution, the only basis for the debate that divides fans? If the true canon chain of events were stated more implicitly, would there even be anything to debate? Of course not. Well, I don't know. Shippers be cray-cray. The writer's intention to leave this topic in particular open to interpretation does exactly what they hoped it would, and has us all engaged in a very active discussion. Now, with the advent of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, do we run the risk of having everything spelled out for us? Will this new game follow the Hollywood model and give us exact answers for all of our questions? Will we have all of the headcanons and things we've personally held as true all these years undone? Will we still be able to interpret and understand things as we like? Will we still have that personal connection with the characters we voiced in our own heads? And will this new game, with all the mystery taken out of it, have the same impact on a new generation of fans as the original did on us?